And we're back in the car on a Saturday like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your early Saturday evening here with me in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Now, there is an awful lot of arcane trivia that I have memorized, that I have collated, that I have stacked, that I have sifted through between the years. But then there are certain things that I should know and I don't. And I did not know that Fred Astaire was born on May 10th. I didn't even know the year. Fred Astaire was born 126 years ago today. Now, the reason why that seems an insane amount of years is because Fred Astaire, and this is not something that I would really normally think about, I will go down on the hill that says he was the most modern person born in the 19th century. Fred Astaire was always a Renaissance man. He was always not only ahead of his time, but ahead of the curve. Fred Astaire was a guy who was a stupendous talent. He was a pretty good actor. He had impeccable comic timing. He was a great personality, a character, a nice guy, and he was the best dancer that anyone ever saw. He could do tap dance. He could dance fast. He could be slow. He did everything just with such style. And it's certainly fair to talk about his friend and the other all-time great dancer of the era a little bit later, Gene Kelly. Gene Kelly was a different kind of performer. He wasn't as good of an actor, I don't think, as Fred Astaire. He certainly didn't have the timing from the comedic perspective. Gene Kelly, though, was someone who came across more like an athlete or an acrobat who happened to be a good dancer, as opposed to somebody who just appeared to be born to do it. As Fred Astaire, this is what he was made for. This is what he was made to do. And I just recently, and I recommend that you check this out if you haven't already, you know, some of you who see me on my Instagram, at the 1970 Academy Awards, with Fred Astaire already more than 3 decades, 35 years removed from his 2 masterpiece romantic comedy dance movies with the also all-time legend Ginger Rogers. First Top Hat, and then the film which I think is one of the best movies of its type ever made, Swing Time. 35 years later, with Fred Astaire, 70 years old, at the 1970 Academy Awards, Bob Hope was hosting. The Bob Hope. Bob Hope hosted a lot. And Bob Hope always got a lot of laughs because he was a funny guy, as we know. And he had this one joke. I don't think he told it more than once. He said, "Welcome to the 53rd Annual Academy Awards, or as it's known around my house, Passover." And that got a big laugh. Yeah, of course Bob Hope was Jewish, right? It was known as Passover. Great joke. I'm sure that got a lot of applause, a lot of giggles in the peanut gallery that night. But Fred Astaire at the 1970 Oscars was just supposed to be a presenter. Might have been documentary feature. I'm not sure about that. But it appeared, it was the sort of thing that seemed as if it was not part of the plan, that it was impromptu. And Bob Hope asked Fred Astaire the question, "Have you ever danced at the Oscars?" And Fred Astaire, with an almost shocked look on his face, said, "No." And Hope then goes, "You're about to." And they start the music, and damned if 70-year-old Fred Astaire moved just as gracefully, as limber as he had in Swing Time, in Top Hat. I don't know how that's even possible, but he had not lost a step. He moved as fluidly as he ever had at 70 years old. He was just born to do it. Now, I didn't know that much about Fred Astaire, and this is, again, a little bit embarrassing to admit, because I was a big movie kid. I read a lot about movies, but even for someone growing up in the 80s as I did, you don't cover every aspect of the movie business. Now it's easier. Touch of a button on your phone, endless bits of information. But I had to want to learn about something to actually learn about it. I could not just be directed. Somebody said, Jared, why don't you Google so-and-so, and then here we go. So the only thing I knew about Fred Astaire, I heard that he was an actor, and there was a Fred Astaire dance studio on Sunrise Highway in Massapequa Park. Who's Fred Astaire? Oh, he was a big star. He was like a really good dancer. That's what I got out of it, but I didn't know that much about him. I had heard of the movie Top Hat, but that's really the only Fred Astaire film that I had even heard of. And then I guess I gained a little bit of knowledge, but I didn't understand how big of a star he was until I got to New York University. And the thing with NYU Film School as it existed, I assume that it's the same general idea now, insofar as depending on what professor you get for what kind of class, or if you get a certain professor in a core class, the curriculum is not going to be the same. It is not a homogenized product. There are certain aspects of film school that will be somewhat homogenized, but depending on what a particular professor's affinity or what they want to get across, the professors and adjunct faculty had enormous latitude with the administrators. They were allowed to run their classes how they saw fit. So, for example, I had, and I could say it now, it's 30 years later, OMG, am I going to get in trouble? I'm not going to get in trouble. My favorite professor I ever had at New York University is a gentleman who I think teaches at Manhattanville currently, David Legowski. I had him twice. I had him during my first semester, fall 94, I had him for an incredible class called a horror film, which I absolutely loved. That was a great class. Learning about horror movies, learning about the horror genre, and getting to see some of the all-time great horror movies. So I then had Professor Legowski the next semester for a class called Hollywood and Its Alternatives. Now, Hollywood and Its Alternatives is a class that nowadays would be different just because it's 30 years ago. I took that class spring 95. The spring 1995 semester was ending right around this time, like the second week of May in 1995. Hollywood and Its Alternatives was a core class. We only had 5 cores. Silent screen. You can guess what that is. Language of film. Hollywood and Its Alternatives, Film Now, and Film Theory. Those were the 5 core classes. Hollywood and Its Alternatives was a survey of cinema in Hollywood and around the world from 1931 until 1960, roughly. So the beginning of sound until you're still before New American Cinema, and you're still dealing with the so-called studio system and the Legion of Decency, whatever the fuck that was supposed to be. Yeah, everybody knew what it was, but they couldn't really define exactly what it meant, because decency is not the same thing to everybody. It doesn't mean the same thing, even though it's the same word. So Hollywood and Its Alternatives now would not be 1931 to 1960. They would have to come up with something else. They would have to do something else, because they wouldn't leave us with the course ending 65 years in the past. It ain't happening. But because Professor Legowski, 2 of his favorite people who ever worked in cinema, they just happened to be, well, not really just happened to be, Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. And he told us at the beginning of that semester, get ready to become tired of Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. So not only did we watch Swing Time, which from a cultural perspective, from a politics of the day perspective, is the most important film that Fred Astaire was ever in. And you could argue Ginger Rogers, although she did a film in the early 40s, I think it was with William Powell, and a Billy Wilder film. Wilder was very young. The Major and the Minor, that's a movie that ain't getting made today. No chance. Ginger Rogers impersonates a 13-year-old girl. She's about 30 at the time. That ain't happening now, because there is a romance angle with a guy who is age appropriate if she's 30, but she is pretending to be 13. There's a lot of very inappropriate innuendo in that film. Couldn't be made today. But we saw Swing Time. We watched clips from Top Hat. We watched sequences from the last movie the 2 of them, Fred and Ginger, did together, The Barkleys of Broadway. And Swing Time has a lot of very problematic content. There's no doubt about it. There is a scene where Fred is in blackface, and he's paying tribute to a famous African-American dancer, Bill Robinson, whose nickname was Bojangles. It's in good taste in the world of the film, but I can see why people watching this movie today would be horrified. Like, how was this allowed to take place? I don't know. But it adds to the film's allure. It adds to the fact that this movie, Swing Time, was not just trying to be a standard issue romantic comedy with two attractive stars. You know, sparks fly. There's all kinds of comic misunderstandings on the manner of like a Cary Grant and Irene Dunne kind of film. But it's a product of its time. It's a product of the Great Depression, which was going on as the film was in production. And it is really an amazing piece of work, problematic though it might be. And Fred Astaire, when he first came on the scene, there is a famous story that said that a studio executive, it could have been Louis B. Mayer, but I don't think it was Louis B. Mayer, but it was somebody at that level, like an Adolph Zukor or, William Lasky, or one of the big guys. Not William Lasky, it would be William Fox. It was one of the big guys. When asked what he thought about Fred Astaire, can act, slightly bald, can dance a little. Can dance a little? That's it? I guess they were real harsh judges of talent back in the day. So one thing that I like about not only the majesty of seeing Fred Astaire get to dance at the Oscars when he was already 70 years old and absolutely kill it, it's the fact that the sense at that time was that his movie career was more or less done, because he wasn't going to get the kinds of roles that he got even into the 50s. They're not going to make a movie with a 70-something-year-old guy as a lead, or even a supporting character dancing around, dancing and romancing, to get a little Clyde Frazier action in it. Dancing and romancing, creating and devastating. You're not going to make that kind of movie, whether it's 2025 or whether it's, going into the 1970s. So him dancing at the Oscars looked as if it was a career topper, like a capper, a cake topper to his career. But then lo and behold, 1974, he co-stars in a movie that's really not that good. It's exciting, it's fun, but it is really stupid. It's like some of the Emmerich Devlin disaster films, which made big money, but when you just sit and look at him, you say, well, this isn't very good. This is not good. He was in The Towering Inferno. And he actually got an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actor. And there were some people that thought he might win in the manner of 22 years later. Lauren Bacall was the odds-on favorite to win for the Barbra Streisand film, which is not that great. The Mirror Has Two Faces. It's okay. I mean, Jeff Bridges, not surprisingly, as always, is the best thing about that film. Barbara's just all right. Mimi Rogers gets a few laughs in that film. She has her moments. But Lauren Bacall kind of runs shit in that movie as the mom. They thought she was going to win the Best Supporting Actress Oscar, not so much because there was anything exciting or different or new in her performance, but because she was Lauren Bacall. She was married to Bogart 40 years before that. She didn't win. In 1974, the year that Art Carney inexplicably, how the hell did he win Best Actor? I'm sorry, no offense. But that was Jack Nicholson's award for Chinatown. Forget it, Jake, it's Chinatown. Are you fucking... I'm sorry, I get worked up. But that was not okay. Should Fred Astaire have won the Supporting Actor Oscar? I don't know, because I don't even remember who was nominated. I don't know who won the award. I just know that Art Carney ended up beating out Jack and some other big hitters in 74. Should not have happened that way. But the idea is that it seemed that Fred Astaire was coming to the end of the line, and then he has another big performance, gets nominated for an Oscar. So what that reminds me of, in 1985, well, actually, it was at the 86 Oscars, Paul Newman got a Lifetime Achievement Award. And it was a Lifetime Achievement Award in the manner of the Academy giving Cary Grant a Lifetime Achievement Award after he had retired, and people were pretty sure Cary was not going to make another comeback, because he'd made a couple of comebacks. Cary was supposedly retired in the early 50s, and he returned to do To Catch a Thief with Hitchcock, and he always was one of those guys. He didn't need to make he didn't need to make money. If he didn't really love a piece of material that he was given, he didn't give a shit. He didn't have to work anymore. It's Cary Grant, for crying out loud. But Paul Newman was given a Lifetime Achievement Award Because, and they wouldn't say this, the idea was he's not going to win an Oscar. He'd gotten screwed 6 times already. He could have won for HUD. He should have won for The Verdict. I mean, there were all of these performances, from a comedic perspective. He could have won for Slapshot. He kept giving these incredible Oscar-worthy performances, whether it was The Sting, whether it was Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Always a bridesmaid, Paul Newman, but apparently never a bride. So, in a kind of opposite way, because in the case of Astaire, it was 4 years after he had his career-topping moment at the Academy Awards, Paul Newman gets a Lifetime Achievement Award. I think it was the Thalberg Award. It was either the Thalberg Award or the Gene Hirschholt Award. I'm not sure. It was one of those two. But it was the kind of thing where the Academy was basically saying, Paul, we're sorry. We're so sorry. Will you accept this? Will you accept this consolation prize? Will you accept this participation trophy, right? Hate to be cynical. That's what it seems like. But what people didn't know is that Paul was about to get an Oscar nomination for the movie that he was working on when he won that participation trophy, whether it was the Gene Hirschholt. I mean, it's a real award, but like, for example, Clint Eastwood got the Thalberg Award. Clint Eastwood had already won 2 Oscars. So he gets that honorary Lifetime Achievement type award, and then he reprises his role as Eddie Felson. The original was The Hustler, and 25 years later, here we have The Color of Money, and lo and behold, Paul Newman wins a Best Actor Oscar of his own after getting the sort of award that they gave Cary Grant, saying, we're sorry. Because how did Cary Grant not win Best Actor for The Philadelphia Story, 1940? James Stewart won the award. I love old Jimmy. I mean, I love the guy, but give me a break. It's Cary Grant's movie. How did he not win for North by Northwest? I mean, come on. Be serious. He could have won for Charade. He's incredible in that too. But Newman got his after what was supposed to be the crowning achievement, a Lifetime Achievement Award, and the unspoken apology from the Academy. We're sorry that you just kept getting fucked. Oops, we made a lot of mistakes. You should have won for this. You should have won for this. Didn't happen. And then, of course, Al Pacino winning for Scent of a Woman when he'd given, I don't know, at least 10 better performances going back to the late 60s, early 70s. But that's neither here nor there. So Fred didn't really work much after Towering Inferno. And if we're being honest, it's not really his performance's interest. It's just okay. That felt like a courtesy nomination, a kind of token of appreciation of the incredible career he had. Going back at that point, 40 years, Top Hat was 33 or 34. And then I think Swing Time was 36. I'm sure I have the years wrong there. I could have taken a guess and gotten it right. But there is something to be said for an individual who is known over and above like the normal stuff of Hollywood, but is known for one specific thing. And they actually really love it. That is something that is an art form as much to them as people who didn't do this in cinema, for example. So when 1977 came around, and there was a little movie with John Travolta called Saturday Night Fever, where he plays this Tony Manero, this kid, a young, he's not really a young dancer. I forgot what his profession was, but on Saturday night, he dances at a local club, and he's like a local hero, a local superstar. And Fred Astaire saw that movie. I don't know if he necessarily loved the movie. I didn't read that, but he loved John Travolta. I don't know if he was familiar with Travolta, because Fred Astaire doesn't look like the kind of guy who would watch Welcome Back, Kotter or Carrie. Travolta had a pretty big role in the movie Carrie, the Brian De Palma film with, William Catt and Nancy Allen, and of course, Sissy Spacek, a very young Sissy Spacek, but then again, they were all really young at the time. But Fred Astaire saw Saturday Night Fever, loved the movie, we think. But he especially loved Travolta, and he loved his dance. He loved the style, how it was all choreographed. And at one of the, I think it was some kind of it might have been the Oscars, like what they sometimes refer to jokingly as the kiddie table. Like it wasn't at the Oscars, but it was at one of the awards shows for the stuff that wasn't going to be on the regular show. It was something like that. And Fred Astaire managed to get himself invited to it because he specifically wanted to meet John Travolta. And there's only one picture of them together. Travolta's so young. I mean, he looks like a little kid. And there is Fred Astaire. He's about 77, maybe 78 at the time. And it's an interesting snapshot. Astaire was not so set in his ways that he only appreciated a certain kind of dancing, because whatever sort of physical attraction the characters played, for example, by Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, were feeling for one another. Professor Legowski disagreed with this, but I did not, and I studied it closely. I never saw anything in most of the dances that they did that I watched that felt like sexual attraction. It didn't. It felt like two great dancers just dancing. That's how they always registered with me. And Saturday Night Fever has there's a lot of machismo. Let's put it that way. I don't want to, get into any more trouble using words that are really not in common usage anymore. But it's a different kind of dancing. The dancing that Travolta does in Saturday Night Fever is closer to the style of a Gene Kelly. That kind of muscular, athletic trapeze artist, like a guy who is probably pretty diesel, who is also a great dancer. It's not Fred Astaire style. It's not even close. But Astaire loved it nevertheless. And, he passed, I think it was 1987. If memory serves, it wasn't that much time. I feel like he passed right around the same time as Lord Laurence Olivier, a completely different kind of all-time great. Olivier, many would consider to be the greatest actor who ever lived. He was so good on the stage, and you could say he was even better in cinema. But Astaire is somebody who didn't look like a conventional leading man, whereas Gene Kelly did. Gene Kelly, you could say, was a matinee idol-looking guy. Absolutely. He was more believable in roles like Singing in the Rain, because he's a really attractive guy. Now, I don't want to drag Fred Astaire, but relatively speaking, he's punching above his weight class, getting with Ginger Rogers, especially in Swing Time. I mean, you say to yourself, wow, but that's Hollywood. And in that case, it was not a matter of an age difference or any kind of where the guy is 60 and the girl's in her 20s. So, no, they're age appropriate. Although I think that Fred he looked a little older than his real age at the time. Not everybody at 35. Some people look 40, right? And Fred was not somebody who lived hard. He wasn't known, at least not to my knowledge, as a big partier. This was not Trevor Howard, who when he was 30 looked 40, but a really attractive 40 because he drank so damn much. But Astaire always kept himself light. He kept himself fit. And I don't know if he subscribed to the Cary Grant. Cary Grant used to joke about the secret to living a long life and having really good skin. Eat as little as possible every day. Give yourself, this is what Cary said, eat as little as possible every day. Great advice. Now, that's something that for sure wouldn't work in 2025. Not that Cary Grant would get canceled for saying that. He probably wouldn't say it out loud. But he just, I guess at a certain point in time, Cary just stopped giving a shit about any of that stuff and just thought, this is my secret to looking good. Everybody has a thing. Paul Newman used to stick his face into buckets of ice water because he was told it would keep the skin young and supple. I don't know. There are plenty of people, though, that don't take good care of themselves and still look way younger than their actual ages. But that's neither here nor there. Fred Astaire, incredible dancer, terrific actor, likable guy, born 126 years ago. The 20th century. He was born in the 19th century, but he was the most forward-seeming 19th century person that I am aware of. There is nobody like Fred Astaire. And the way the movie business is, musicals made a big comeback. They definitely made a big comeback. So, who knows? Maybe there will be another Fred Astaire. He didn't have a great singing voice. So something like West Side Story would not have been to his, he could do the dances, but it wouldn't have fit his screen persona. So we still have to wait. Is there going to be another Fred Astaire? Probably not. He was a unicorn, an extraordinary talent, and somebody whose birthday 126 years ago is worth remembering. And I learned so much about Fred Astaire in the NYU of the mid-1990s. I'm just glad I got to share a little bit of my kind of enthusiasm for him, if you want to use the word passion, for what a talent he was and his screen persona, and those two incredible movies in Top Hat and Swing Time. Fred Astaire, born on this day, 1899. This has been episode 508 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all so much for spending some of your now actually Saturday evening here with me in New York. But if you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Until then, peace.